If we just take a quick look at what I described, during the Greek period, in the early Greek period, it was materialistic thinking, but subjective, but materialistic. At some point of time, there was onset of idealism of the form that idea is prior, matter is secondary, and whatever you can think of, that is the truth for you, the subjective mode of thinking, and a lot of belief systems sprouted. But in the Middle Age, one kind of belief system became the mainstream, but a belief system. So, the Middle Age can be said to be the golden age of idealism. And you would notice that in that golden age of idealism spanning over 1,000 years, there was practically no science. Science died down, because it was belief and no question. In the 15th, 16th century, the things started changing, because even though trade and commerce was low, but there was some trade and commerce in the main for the sake of the aristocrats, for the sake of the landowners, because they needed aristocratic goods. So, there was some exchange, some trade, and the traders over the centuries were slowly becoming financially more powerful. And around 14th, 15th century, they saw that so far they were simply buying from one place and selling it another. They were buying from, say, India spices and selling it in Europe. They are buying wherever cloth is produced and selling it to another place. They were buying some exotic foodstuff from one place and selling it another. Glassware, ironware, and all these were subjects of trade. In the 14th, 15th century, they started to manufacture these things. So, they started sort of, these are called manufactories, where the normal people, the people who would otherwise engaged in tilling the land, when they are free, they would come and make something for the trader. Something like something made of iron, something made of glass, something made of cloth. And these manufactories increase the volume of production, and slowly these people, the traders, become financially powerful, and that brought in a disbalance in the kind of society that existed. Earlier, the aristocrats and the landowners were calling the shots, but now the moneyed people, the traders in the main, they became relatively more powerful. And in that stage, we see in the cultural sphere birth of a new kind of movement called Renaissance. Renaissance actually questioned everything. Renaissance questioned everything. So far, whatever were believed, people were questioning that. Earlier, God was at the center of everything. All paintings were centered around God, and humans were sort of appendages in the paintings. But now, humans became the center of all paintings. Look at the Sistine Chapel painting by Michelangelo. Even Jesus is painted as a powerful man, that otherworldly features are gone, a powerful man. So, and people started depicting man as the center of everything. The center of attention came to humans. In that stage, in science, a lot of developments happened. Copernicus took a look at the models of the solar system that were in existence. I said that one model of solar system was where the planets move as they are embedded on crystal spheres. Another picture was the Ptolemaic picture, where the planets move in epicycles. As people took more and more closer look at the planet's motion, they found that these are not being explained by the epicycle picture, and so far the idea was that there was the orbit of a planet, and there would be another. So, it would be circle over circle, and naturally the orbit of the planet would be something like this as visible from the earth. But people were observing the actual motion of the planets and they could not explain it with this picture. And then they thought that there may be epicycles over epicycles over epicycles over epicycles, so on and so forth. And it became very complicated. The picture of the solar system became very complicated. And in this status, Copernicus saw that there can be an alternative model of the solar system, not with the earth at the center, but with the sun at the center. And sun at the center and the planets going around it, earth is also seen as a planet and the moon is going around the earth. So, that was the picture painted by Copernicus. He knew that his views were heretic, will be considered heretic, and so he allowed publication of his book only when he saw it only when he was in the deathbed. But his book, after it was published, was banned from most of Europe, but still banning was not very effective in those days because copies remain here and there in different people's possession and in libraries. This man Giordano Bruno, who was training to become a monk, saw such a copy in one church library, read it and was convinced, and he took it upon himself to propagate that idea among others. So, Giordano Bruno. Earlier I had said Copernicus. The Polish monk Copernicus, and Giordano Bruno accepted what Copernicus had to say. He was convinced that it was true and he took it upon himself to propagate that view. He understood that he cannot do that being in Italy because it was in the grip of the church rule. So, he fled Italy, went to other countries in Europe, went to Paris, went to Germany, went to England, and from everywhere, the more he preached his ideas, he was thrown out, he was driven out. Not only did he believe in the Copernican picture of the solar system, he believed that the stars that we see, these are also like suns, and like the sun, they also have planetary systems around them and they might also harbor life. So, earth is not the only abode of life, and that these were all heretic views in the view of the church at the time. Finally, the church caught him, and after years of torture, trying to get him to accept the church view, to recant his own views, he refused, and finally in the year 1600 he was burnt at stake in Rome. At that time, Galileo Galilei was teaching in the University of Pisa when Bruno was burnt. He was having to teach what was the established belief at that time, especially in mechanics. The belief was, according to Aristotle, force produces motion. According to Aristotle, a heavier body will fall faster than a lighter body, and while teaching this, the only difference was that Galileo said, let us go and test it. So, as per legend, he took his students and went up the leaning tower of Pisa and dropped one heavy mass of iron and one small mass of iron, and they came down together with the same sound. And that sort of demonstrated that earlier belief was wrong, but most importantly, it demonstrated a very important philosophical current. It brought in a very important philosophical current, objective thinking, which said that what I am thinking, what I am believing, what I am having to teach may be wrong, and therefore, it is my task to test it against physical reality. So, he also tested these things by rolling balls on inclined planes, and he did experiments on pendula, and through that he established that actually force does not produce motion, force produces change in motion, which was later adopted by Newton to produce his first law of motion. Galileo also built a telescope and looked at the sky for the first time. And when he saw the sky, he saw spots on the sun, he saw mountains on moon, he saw phases of Venus, he saw satellites of Jupiter, and so on and so forth. Now, two important observations out of these. One, phase of Venus. Phase means the way moon goes through phases, new moon, full moon, half moon, that way Venus also goes through phases, and Galileo realized that that can happen only if Copernicus' idea is true, Copernican model is true, and only if Venus is an interior planet. Then only it is possible to have phases of a planet. And he also saw the satellites of Jupiter, and he realized that then if some satellite is moving around that planet, there cannot be a crystal sphere there. So, the crystal sphere idea was immediately proved wrong. He invited his colleagues of the university to look through his telescope as at what he was saying. They refused. They said that this is the problem, the telescope is the problem. Whatever has been believed is to be believed, and the telescope is the problem. So, he went into trouble with the church. I am not going into the details. Finally, he was called to the church. He was called to a inquisition, as it was called. Those who did something that was heretic, they would be called by the inquisition. There would be a trial, and finally there would be punishment. And the old man was punished for the rest of his life in home imprisonment. So, but through that, during that period, he wrote up his own ideas in form of books and somehow managed to get this out, and his disciples took it to Holland, which was at that time Protestant and not all that much in church's control. The books were published from there, and people came to know about his ideas. Through that, more or less the horizon opened. At the time, something else was happening. Tycho Brahe was looking at the motion of the planets very accurately. He made an observatory in a place, in an island off the Holland coast called Uraniborg, and he was making very accurate observations. But at some point in time, he fell out with the king. He was driven out from there. He again got shelter with another king in Austria. He built another observatory, and at that time, a young man, Johannes Kepler, became his assistant, and within a year, Tycho Brahe died. When Tycho Brahe died, all his gathered mass of data regarding the motion of the planets came to the possession of Kepler. He sat down with it and tried to work out the motion of the planets for a long time, and then he came up with the Kepler's laws, that the planets move in ellipses, and what you know as the Kepler's laws, that they subtend equal areas in equal time, and so on and so forth. So, with that, I would say the Renaissance was in full swing, and in the next stage we will see a great development. The moment the mental roadblock was moved, believe, don't question, people started questioning and not believing, and then they started looking at the whole world anew, and that is when the science proper started. That is why the science, the onset of scientific era is said to be from the time of Galileo. Why? Because Galileo introduced the objective method of thinking.